This is the Horse Radio Network.
This is episode 550 of the Dressage Radio Show, official podcast of the United States Dressage Federation on the Horse Radio Network, brought to you by Kentucky Performance Products, Total Saddle Fit, and Surefoot Equine Stability Program. On today's USDF episode, we are going to do a trainers conference wrap-up with participants Meagan Davis and Emily Donaldson. After that, we'll have a discussion with Wendy Murdoch about some training aids that she has developed, and then we'll bring you a tip that we learned from the conference.
This is Reese Koffler-Stanfield from Loxahatchee, Florida.
And this is Philip Parks, back to Rockwood, Ontario, and you're listening to the Dressage Radio Show.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, Reese.
I literally just saw you yesterday, so hi again, Phil.
I was just thinking about what a whirlwind week I had last week. You know, flying out on Saturday, doing the trainers conference, flying back in on Wednesday. Actually flew in and then taught some lessons in the evening, so that was a little tricky.
He's saying that, everybody, and I was the hostess with the mostest. No, it was great. Actually, we had a really, really, really fun time. Trainers Conference is always a super busy week down here. So on Sunday, Phil came in on Saturday. We saw some friends, and then Sunday we worked some horses. We had a really awesome time. It was a beautiful day, and it was just kind of chill here at the farm, and it was really fun. It just gave some fantastic lessons to me and my students. So that was super fun. And again, we saw some friends, and then we had the conference Monday and Tuesday. And Tuesday night, we went to the Helga Strand presentation of sales horses. And Wednesday morning, I will assure you, Phil was not hit by a falling iguana, but it was very cold here for Florida. Even Phil.
I wish I brought my hat, my toque, and my mittens and everything from Canada, but I didn't have it. And then so I was like, it's too cold. I'm going home.
Yeah,
where I know how to dress appropriately. What's that?
No, you were like, it's cold. I'm going inside. I was like, thanks. I'm freezing my tail out here. It was actually quite cold. And Richard Malgram came and did some long lining here while you were here. So it's just been so busy. I'm not going to lie. It's Thursday night. And after we finish the show here, I'm already in my pajamas. I'm going to bed. So it's been a lot of fun, though. A busy week down here in Florida, which has been great.
Yeah. And the trainers conference was awesome. Was learning so much and just really, really enjoyed, listening to the lessons and watching the different trainers do the lessons. So, we've had some really, really good discussions about all these things. It's really a learning week.
It really was. It was a learning week for sure. It was great. So we actually have quite a long show, so we're going to get going. But we wanted to kind of do a wrap up of the trainers conference. And so that happened here Monday, Tuesday. And that was with 4 amazing clinicians: Ann Gribbins, Gary Rockwell, Lars Peterson, and Ashley Holzer. So we're going to have a quick commercial break from USDF, and we're going to come back with Emily Craig Donaldson to talk about her experience at the symposium.
Founded in 1973, the United States Dressage Federation has become the largest organization to represent a single Olympic equestrian discipline. At nearly 30,000 members strong, USDF is your connection to dressage education, competition, and achievement. Visit USDF.org to learn more about USDF education, competition and award programs, and to shop our online store. Again, that's USDF.org, your online destination for dressage.
Well, tonight we are so happy to have Emily Craig Donaldson on the show. She is an FEI rider and trainer and was a participant in the 2020 USDF Trainers Conference here in Loxahatchee, Florida. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Your horse is such a beautiful boy, and it was so fun to see you ride. Phil and I were cheering everybody on. It was lots of fun. So tell us a little bit about your takeaway from the Trainers Conference this year.
So I was excited going into it because I trained with Lars Peterson, and he was one of the 4 panelists for the conference. And so I was excited mostly because I obviously feel very comfortable around him. And I thought, well, if I'm going to ride in front of hundreds of people, that is an advantage to being, if I end up getting paired with him, to at least having a relationship. Unfortunately, my horse was pretty anxious. I was nervous. I usually don't get nervous. I don't know what was wrong with me, but I
well, like
really
500
nervous.
people were around.
It's
like, I'm just
intimidating
gonna
for
go with
everyone.
that. Like,
I don't know
it
why
wasn't like there were just Phil and I there. Like there was 4
Yeah.
clinicians,
Yeah.
like I don't know how many people, but there were a lot of people. And in
Yeah.
that ring, everyone's super close to the
They're
ring,
right
so they're
there.
right there.
Yeah, so I was a little anxious, and that didn't help. And so the first day, to be honest, going into it, I never really had a clear, and I've never done this before, is I didn't really know what the plan was. And so I was a little out of sorts about how the session was going to work. And I felt like, unfortunately, in the first session, sort of, it was a little vague. And I think my horse didn't really help the situation. So left it feeling disappointed and frustrated, mostly with myself. And so going into the second day, I felt more confident, more relaxed. And horse was tense, unfortunately. But Erin Gribbins basically took charge. And I thought she did a really good job on letting me voice the fact that I know my horse. And I was able to at least have, we were able to have interaction and a dialogue. And I felt like she respected me, which was great. But she also gave me a lot of really good advice, and she zeroed in on his strengths and weaknesses immediately. So it was good, basically, and she focused the whole session with me. And there was obviously feedback from the other panelists, but really basics. And that's what I liked about it. Obviously, I think when you go in front of that many people, you want to show off and you want to be like, look at what I can do. But that's not always constructive, and you don't always learn from that. So I definitely feel like, hopefully, we gave the audience examples of how to work through tension, and the fact, like, he's the type of horse, he's big, he tends to run through the half halts. Because I think the second day she gave a lot of good takeaways. So I was really pleased with that. My posture is my kryptonite, my upper body and my eyes. When I get nervous, I look down. And everyone said, like, look up. And I thought, okay, like, I'm just so right now. I'm just going to keep looking at the beach. So, but, it's all stuff, like, everyone has something, most people do.
Yeah.
So it was good.
It was good. And like you said, it was good that they were taking some rider feedback. And, it's really difficult to go into a session with even just one coach that doesn't know your horse, and there you had like 3, and they have their own ideas about what to do or how to make the experience a good one. But I think if you don't get any rider feedback in the beginning, or allow the rider to say a little bit, then the session can be limited, because the riders also have worked through different problems on their own a little bit. They know their horse, and I think they need to ask, what do you want to get out of it? What do you want to work on? Do you think that you need to, I remember specifically for you, like, do you feel like you need to canter right now? And you're like,
right.
Yeah, I really do.
Right.
And, rather than, just telling you what to do and just telling you how to fix your problem, I think you've got to go into it with the coach and the rider, in discussion the whole time. And what does that feel like? Or how does, is that better, and whatever, and just through that you can tell that you were absolutely right. He needed to canter, and he needed to work out his stress in a way that you've already worked out, with him, like what's best in this moment. And I think that was just a mark of a good coach, or like they can't always just be in charge and telling you what to do,
right,
because they think they know. I mean, you've already got hours and hours and hours on that horse that you sort of probably experimented with the different approaches to when he does get very tense. But also as you were going around, she didn't just let you do whatever you wanted. She was like, okay, if we're going to canter, you've got to do this, 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 and this. And so it's sort of like allowing you to do a little bit of what you want, but not completely just letting you go out on your own. And I think that's a great experience of working with someone instead of somebody working sort of at you or just talking at you.
Right. Because I've had instances, I had an experience last year that hit home for me and where I was working with a prominent, very highly respected person, and the session I felt was going on really long, and I should have spoken up and said, hey, I think the horse needs a walk break, or I think he's done, and I didn't because I was afraid to. The next day, the horse didn't feel so great, and I learned my lesson, and I think it's hard in situations like that. And I know there's a fine line. Like I know when I teach, and I said this to them, hey, let's do this, and they say no, and I'm like, okay, okay. And I think it's hard to figure out how, and it's a little bit in the context of like, well, who is it that's saying, it's like, what's not their credentials, and at the end of the day, it's like, it's your horse, and you know your horse best. But I think it can be really tricky in those situations to be able to vocalize what you think it would make sense. And I think if you can back it up, and obviously sometimes you do something and it wasn't the right decision, and that's just part of training. But I think it can be like, at least for me, when I picked up the canner and Ann said, I didn't tell you the canner, and I said, yeah, but it's what he needs to do. I thought, oh shoot, like, she works with me. So, but it's stuff like that where I think like it can be really intimidating to say, no, this is what I think. And like what I like about with Lars is I ride with him. I've ridden with him a lot. Is there's a dialogue, and like today I had a lesson with him with one of my horses, that's another tricky horse that I own. And I said, like in the situation, I said, okay, like I don't know what to do. And we just sat there and we talked about it. And then he like called me out on something that I was doing that I wasn't even aware of. But it was in a very, it was not critical. It was just basically like problem solving. And I love that environment to be in, as a student, as a trainer, is like, I love having that back and forth. And I'm not a big talker when I ride, but I like being able to ask a question and not feel like it's a stupid question. And so anyway, I really felt that on the second day of the trainers conference. I was genuinely appreciative of Ann, and I was thinking about reaching out there. I don't know if you care, but I was really pleased with how comfortable she made me feel, because she is quite intimidating. And I thought she did a really nice job of working with me on the horse, and she made me feel comfortable that I could have a dialogue with her in a, very formal public setting like that. So.
And I think that was a tough for the riders. It was really interesting for the spectators who, theoretically at the FEI Trainers Conference, if somebody has FEI experience that are there. So it's an experience audience, and, having 4 different instructors and 4 really different ways of looking at things was really interesting to watch. But like you said, that's really intimidating as a rider. So I thought you guys did a really, really good job about that. But like you said, as a professional rider, but even just as an advocate for your own horse, it's really important to not lose what you know about your horse, right? I think that some people get intimidated in a clinic situation, like, oh, I shouldn't. Of course, everyone was incredibly respectful, but, it is important that if you feel something happening, or you need, like you said, it's important to kind of speak up and say something about your horse. But I've obviously this was a cool setting, and you all handled it beautifully, and it was really cool to watch and see. Like you said, we all have tendencies when we get nervous, and to see all that stuff get worked through with these amazing instructors and amazing horses and riders was as a spectator fantastic to watch. So we appreciate you guys coming out and letting us do that.
Thank you.
Well, Emily, you guys were just so fantastic, but how can our listeners find you online if they have any more questions for you?
I'm guilty of being one of those people that has a website that I don't maintain that well, but I do have a website. I maintain a pretty strong presence on my Facebook page for my business, which is Emily Donaldson Dressage LLC. And then I also have an Instagram account under the same name. And I'm pretty good about getting back to people if they have questions, if they email me. My email is emilydonaldsondressage@gmail.com. So I'd be happy to talk with anyone about anything.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much, and good luck for the rest of your Florida season.
Thank you.
Well, we have another rider, Meagan Davis, who's going to come on next, and she's going to talk to us about her experience also at the 2020 USDF Trainers Conference. Well, tonight we are so excited to have Meagan Davis of Meagan Davis Dressage. She's an international rider and competitor. Meagan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Oh, we're really happy to have you. And it was so fun to see you ride at this year's Trainers Conference. Can you tell us a little bit about your horse and a little bit about your experience?
So I rode Leopold of Shakespeare. We call him Teddy. A little more reasonable. He's a 12-year-old Oldenburg gelding. And he's schooling third level, actually showing third level, schooling fourth level. And his owner is Scott Durkin.
Fantastic. And how long have you had this horse in training?
This is my third winter with Teddy. So 3 years.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, tell us a little bit about your experience at the conference.
So I loved riding there. I thought it was really interesting to have the trainers and the judges going at you from both sides and picking apart the riding. And, Gary was so much 15 meters is, it's a 15-meter circle. You're not going to drift out onto that 16-meter line. And I was on my marks because I was like, if I even go a little bit bigger, Gary's going to have my hide. I know it for sure. And he was. But, as a trainer, I do that to my students. So I'm glad somebody's out there doing it to me because we need that. If you're not riding the correct size circle all the time, how are you going to know if it's a little bit big in the show ring?
Exactly.
Oh, you've got a big fan in Reese here. She likes
I know.
just
love
geometry.
I'm so mean about it.
It's you don't want to give away points on something that every horse can do. It doesn't matter how fancy the horse is. Any horse can do a correct size circle.
Yes, exactly. And practice, you have to do perfect practice. And they talked about that. Like, don't do something 40 times wrong and be like, oh, why didn't I get it right? It's
exactly.
Perfect. Yeah. So I love that.
What did Ashley said? Don't practice something wrong because you get really good at being wrong.
At being wrong. Yeah, exactly.
Don't get really good at being of doing something the wrong way.
Yeah.
Yes.
I thought it was also very refreshing that Ashley was sort of like, sometimes it may not be the prettiest thing to get your point across, but if you do it once and it's not so pretty, then you don't have to do it that harsh again the next time.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes total sense.
There has to be, some way to correct the problems, whether it's a rider problem or a horse problem,
Yeah.
Something needs to change if it's not going right.
Exactly. And I think she used the word physical. Sometimes you have to get physical.
Yeah. But sometimes you have to make your point.
Horses are huge. Yeah. They're really big.
Yeah.
I think we've all had the experience of being pulled around for a bit.
Yeah. And they should be as honest to our hands as they are to our legs. I'm always saying that to my students. You're quick to say, hey, they're behind my leg, but are you quick to say they're not sensitive to the hand?
Exactly. Makes total sense. I love it. So what are some other tips that you got from your time in the clinic?
Well, the Ronvair at the canter for the changes with Teddy from Lars was super. That was the first day. Doing the shoulder 4 to the change I didn't think worked as well as Lars's way. And it made him soft and supple. And then he accepted the new outside leg and boom, we have the change there. So and this was cool, right? Because part of the conference was they brought in some horses that had some issues, which was good. It was fun as trainers, and most everyone that goes to that conference is a trainer or an FEI rider. And we run into problems like training horses. It's amazing to see some horses that are fantastic. You can do that here in Wellington and go to the horse show and see that. But to talk about you were having some issues in the changes, right? This horse came with difficult changes, right? Yeah, it's taken us a good solid year to get him to where he is. And I'm not afraid to say that. I mean, every horse is a little bit different. We had to develop the muscling. We had to develop the timing in order for him to even think about doing the change. And I mean, the first day, a couple times, he was just like, he made a grunt noise and didn't do anything when I asked him to change. It's true. And then Lars is like, you put him in this angle, he can't just grunt at you. He has to change because you're manipulating his body a little bit in a way that positions him to do that change better. And explain it to him, right? Explain it to him a little better what you wanted. Yeah, and set them up in the position. Say, hey, listen, your shoulders have to go here. Your haunches are going to go over here. I'm going to make it a little bit easier by bringing your haunches to the new direction so your hind legs don't have to cross as much ground. And then he was like, oh, okay, now I know what to do. I'll do it.
Yeah, and it was cool.
That's good. So I think at this point, I mean, this is why we need to have certain things in place to be successful at the next level. So this is why second level is all about shoulder in, traver, having that really well established, because I think you really need those tools. I sort of call them the tools of alignment, right? You have to be in charge of the front end and independent of the back end and all of that. And yes. And if you don't have that established, you can't use the tools when a horse has a problem at the next level.
Exactly.
You
can't put their haunches where you want them, or their shoulders, or their rib cage just a little bit more to the left. You can't force a change to happen. You can only set them up and ask. That's
right. And in my experience in teaching changes, every horse needs a little bit different alignment so they can find out how to make that quick jump to the other lead, right? And so as trainers, we need to be able to access all those alignments. And as trainers, we need somebody on the ground to sort of, we do our best at trying to feel what's going on or to watch in the mirror what's going on. But I think it's really, really hard because you can't see all things and pay attention to all things at all moments, that eyes on the ground can help you just to say, you know what, he's throwing his hip into you at this moment, or he's throwing his shoulder into you at this moment, and you need to try this out to make it work. And that's what I thought was really cool, because Ashley tried one approach, Lars tried a different approach. It's not that one exact approach will work every time, but it's like being able to work through it a little bit and try different things is really cool, and get new ideas.
Yeah. I thought that having the two trainers say, well, this is my approach to the changes, and then Lars comes in after Ashley and he's like, I wouldn't do this at all. I do it this way. I thought that was so cool for people to see that, there's many roads to get to the same end point, if you will, and there's no wrong way to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually thought that sort of moment of the conference, and you were the first rider in. So, that's always tough, because, we were all like, how are they going to work this?
I think they sort of felt the same way.
Yeah, like, how are we going to do this? But I thought it was super cool. I thought that was actually my favorite moment, was here you have two Olympic riders, very, very well-respected riders, different styles, completely different styles. Ashley worked with you, and then Lars came right back in and did something different. And I mean, both of them got a desired result, but it was just really cool to see that. And just as a trainer and a rider, sometimes always thinking like, sometimes a different approach to a problem is important, because it's easy to get hung up. Like, we always do it this way. But again, we talked about that. Like, you're doing it that way 40 times wrong. So you've got it. You're clearly not getting the message through on what you need to do. So how do you change that up? And that was just awesome to see.
Yeah. And maybe the horse thinks differently, and we have to approach it in a different manner because he comprehends things differently.
Yeah.
Exactly. You've got to access different parts of the horse's body and make, maybe this leg a little quicker and this leg a little bit slower. And I think that's kind of cool, to work with different coaches, in these clinic type situations, just to keep it fresh and keep different ideas in your head, and then you sort of kind of can add more tools to your toolbox of helping that horse, but also your next horse as they come along, and you have to teach them. You need a lot of different exercises and tools to make it all work, because horses are so unique in how they learn and how you want to teach them, and how you need a million different approaches.
Yes, definitely.
Well, and I think too, as trainers, we don't always have the answers. What's cool about having something like that, a conference and friends, is you can literally call up a friend and be like, hey, what are some things that you would try with this? And I'm super lucky because I have Philip, and down here there's people all over that are good friends of mine that I can say, hey, have you had this problem, or how do you solve that? And I did feel like this conference was very interesting that way. You had, Ann Gribbins is also, she's an international 5-star judge, and she's also a very established trainer. To have Ann and Ashley and Lars, along with Gary, who's a 5-star judge, was really interesting. So if anybody gets a chance to watch the symposium, I know they were videoing it. It was really cool, and I would definitely recommend watching it.
Yeah, I think it kind of they sort of spurred each other on a little bit. Like it was a little bit of a competition. And from my standpoint, I was like, I'm game for anything. Let's go. What do you got for me?
Yeah. You guys were great. The demo riders were really, really on it, and that was really cool. And it was cool to see you guys work through that problem. I love it. Well, Meagan, we can't thank you enough for coming on the show and showing your experience and being brave enough to go to the conference and show a problem. We always like to, show everybody we're amazing and perfect, but it was really cool to see that. So if our listeners have any questions, how can they find you online?
My website is meagandavisdressage.com. I'm on Facebook, Meagan Davis Dressage, Instagram. I'm just not on Twitter.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Meagan.
Thank you for having me.
Right after this commercial break from Kentucky Performance Products, we're going to come back with Wendy Murdoch, and she's a fan favorite. We hope you enjoy.
This Nutrition Minute is brought to you by Kentucky Performance Products, the company that simplifies your search for research-proven nutritional supplements at kppusa.com.
The horse that matters to you matters to Kentucky Performance Products. Managing horses can be challenging. Each horse's personality affects the way he behaves and reacts to the world around him. Horses with certain dispositions can be at higher risk for developing health problems than others. High-strung or excitable horses are easily stressed, but so is the timid, quiet warrior. Stressed horses are more likely to develop digestive upsets that lead to colic, diarrhea, and ulcers. Nalox Advanced was specifically developed to support a digestive tract that is under stress. It sustains proper pH levels, reducing the incidence of ulcers and hindgut imbalances, while simultaneously supporting the healing of damaged tissues. Nalox Advanced supports the complete digestion of starches and sugars and sustains populations of beneficial bacteria. Make life a little easier on your sensitive horse and start him on Nalox Advanced today. To learn more about the ingredients in Nalox Advanced, visit Kentucky Performance Products at kppusa.com.
Well, tonight we are so excited to have Wendy Murdoch back. She is the Murdoch Method and the Surefoot Stability Pads. Welcome, Wendy. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. It's good to be back.
Oh, well, you were just down here with me, and we had quite a fun day, didn't we?
Oh, it was a blast, actually.
We really did have a great day. You should have seen everybody was lined up and listening to Wendy. It was so good. Even my horse at one point was like, this is awesome. I like chatting with Wendy.
Oh, yeah. The horses love my lessons because it's a lot about the rider. So they get to stand around and listen, and hang out with us.
Yeah.
They think it's great.
That's like Big Mike's dream day. He thought it was amazing.
Life is to stand around and look pretty.
Yeah, he was like, I look pretty.
Socialize.
I love it. Well, Wendy, tell everybody a little bit about your visit here to us in Florida.
Okay. So I was at the AAP meeting in Denver, Colorado, and I met Dr. Engel. And he asked me to come to Wellington to do a demo for him and his group about Surefoot. So you had said you were down there. And so I just kind of made arrangements with a couple of people that I knew and flew down. And so we played on Saturday. I think I was there for 4 days. I saw Dr. Engel Friday night. I did a demo with the horses. They loved it. They got it. It was so nice. And then I came and visited you, and we got to play with more riding stuff. We put Big Mike on the pads. So you could feel what it was like under saddle. But then we got to play with the Franklin balls with you. And that was really, really fun.
It was so fun. Yes. So that was really cool because Big Mike had never been on the pads. He's on the pads at home on the ground, but I'd never ridden him on the pads. So that was super cool. And then we did a complete biomechanics lesson with me. And now I have a whole bag of tricks, literally. So Wendy, tell us a little bit about the Franklin balls and what you did with me.
So, so what I do with riders is I help them feel things because most riding lessons are taught either visually, you watch somebody do something, or verbally. And riding is so much about feel. So when I teach a riding lesson, I stick my hands on the rider, and I always ask permission, because some people are a little funny about it, right? And if that's the case, I have other ways I can approach it. But basically, I want to feel what you think you're doing, because once I know what it feels like, then I can tell you where you need to go. In other words, it's so hard to know our own body. It's so hard to know what we're really doing. And especially when it comes to our back and our hips, because it's just not a place we have a lot of awareness typically. Like, we've got a lot of awareness about our fingers and our eyes and our ears and our lips and our feet, because there's so much more area in the brain that's mapped out in those places. But when we get to the thighs and the back and the pelvic area, there's a lot less mapping. So that's the most important part of our body for riding, our pelvis and our thighs and our midsection, but it's where we have the least amount of map. So what I do is I put my hands on the rider, I put one hand on their back, one hand on their tummy, and if they're squeamish, I just put their hands on first and put my hands on top. But you weren't squeamish at all. And then I just have you take a breath, and I feel what's going on. And in so many riders, when they're breathing, they're actually tensing the lower back and tightening it. So instead of it expanding the way we want the horse's loins to expand, they're actually shortening it. And that's what happens when the horse goes on the forehand. So I usually tell my riders to slump, and they all think I'm crazy because, yeah, right? Because when you slump, it lets the lower back soften and the ribs change shape. And the two sets of free ribs that are at the bottom of the rib cage, they're not attached to the sternum. And they get to expand back, so that when you breathe, those ribs get to expand, and you can feel that in the lower back. And then I just get you to fold over a little bit to put the rib cage over the pelvis. But it's not slumping, but everybody tells me it feels like slumping, because we're so used to the idea of sitting up straight, which actually is hinging the rib cage back a little bit and hollowing. So once I get you in that position and you feel it, and I push on you and I move the horse instead of you remember that part?
Yes,
like when
exactly.
I pushed on your back and I move the horse, then I know I've got you in a really solid place, but it's not tense, even though it feels wrong, is what a lot of people tell me at first. But, that's the place you want to be, is when I push on your back, I move the horse instead of you, because then all your aids are going to go through to the horse. Right. And then, yeah. And so then the next piece that's important is understanding where your hips are and what needs to happen. And this is where the Franklin balls are so handy, right? Because when you sit, and there's 7 different kinds of they're different sizes and different textures. And there's 2 that are like, I call them peanuts, because it's a single piece as opposed to 2 individual balls. But basically, when the rider sits on the balls on the saddle, it's kind of like Surefoot for your butt, because now you're on an unstable surface. And so you can't just lock into your habit to the saddle the way you would normally. And so it lifts you up enough, and it opens the hip angle between the torso and the thigh and lengthens the thigh down, brings the lower leg back. And it's like, in so many cases, it's like magic, because it puts the rider in this beautiful alignment. And I think that's probably what you felt is it just does it, right? You don't have to work at it.
Yeah. It's kind of a funny feeling at first. You kind of have to just like take a deep breath and just kind of like, wow, this feels weird, and sort of own it a little bit. Like you said, like they're there to like Surefoot for your butt, to make you pay attention to where your body's supposed to be, so you get that feeling.
Right. And it's unstable. Like the balls, if you're put more weight on one seat bone, the balls are going to move a little bit, and your brain reports that and goes, wait a second, this feels like really, some people at first it feels awful. Some people at first, love it right away. And so if it doesn't feel good, just take them out and give yourself a rest, and then pop them back in again and sit on them again, just to give yourself a chance to kind of process that piece of information. But basically, because you're no longer in the saddle, you're on the balls, you have to find better balance. You can't rely on the saddle to help you as much. Right. So, yeah. And so it really gets your attention, and that's kind of why I love them. And so the first question I typically ask people when they're sitting on them is, does the weight feel equal? And a lot of people will go, no, one's heavier than the other, or one feels sharper, or one, feels like it's moving around. That's another typical comment, which means you're not sitting square in the saddle. But you don't notice that because it's kind of like, it's like a pair of shoes that you've had for a while. You have to wear them for a few months. You're going to wear them into your pattern, and that's going to feel normal, right? And then like you get a new pair of shoes and you're like, oh, these are all wrong.
Yeah, well, no, it's true.
Yeah. So the balls are kind of like, getting a new saddle where you have to like go, wait a second, maybe me in the saddle have kind of gotten into a pattern, into a habit. And suddenly you can't go there when you're sitting on the balls because, you feel unstable. So now the nervous system really pays attention. It's like, whoa, what's going on here? And I can still push on your back and you're totally solid. It doesn't feel that way to you though, I mean, because I pushed on your back when you were on the balls and you were totally solid.
No, it's so true. Once you feel that, again, I rode around for a while and you said, okay, let's take him out. And then when you take him out, your body you understand because you can say, you said, okay, feel like you're tucking yourself under, like you had the balls underneath you. And I did. And then it really, really helped. So it makes total sense.
Yeah. And the weirdest thing about them actually that I find fascinating is that, after you've ridden on them for 5 or 10 minutes, if they start to get uncomfortable, obviously you take them out. But, after you ride on them for a few minutes and then you take them out, everybody says, my saddle feels so much deeper, right? And It's this really weird thing that, you've been sitting on something that's a round ball. And so it's like this inverse thing. You take them out and you feel like you're sitting in kind of a hollow. But I think it's because the muscles have all relaxed. It's like all the muscles around your pelvis and your buttocks and your upper thigh have softened because you found balance. And then when you sit down, you just feel so much deeper when you take the balls out. It's really a fascinating kind of experience.
Yeah, it really is. So Wendy, and this is even more for a question for me, because I ended up ordering a set from you. So I have all these cool tools. Can you tell everybody, I mean, there's lots of sizes and there's different shapes. Like, how does that work?
So, everybody's a little bit different, and that's why there's different balls. There's I have funny names for them. So the larger soft orange ones I call oranges. And so if I have someone that's sort of a larger person, I'll use those because it'll lift you up a little bit more. If I have a smaller person, there's a small smooth ball. I call it tomatoes because they're red. And then there's a sort of an in-between green textured ball. And some people really like the texture as opposed to the smooth surface. And then there's a smaller textured. So there's different sizes. And like if in some cases, if you're on the larger ball, you might feel yourself kind of hitting the front of the saddle. And so clearly those are too big and you need something smaller. And you can use them in a Western saddle, English saddle, a trail saddle. So that doesn't it's not dependent on the saddle itself. And then there's these really soft, they're like, I call them like purple tennis balls. They're soft plush balls and they're super soft. So if you've got a really sensitive seat bones, that tend to get tender, those are nice. But you can also take them and I'll put them under people's elbows so they have to keep their elbows by their sides.
Yeah, that's what we've been doing with them.
Yeah, that's super handy. And if somebody's really grippy, I'll put that just between the knee and the saddle. I find people aren't as grippy as they used to be, which is good. But if somebody's really grippy, you can put it there. And then, it's kind of like, the other two is air-filled. I call it a peanut, blue peanut, because it's one piece, but it kind of has a peanut shape. Yeah. And that's air-filled. And then there's another one that's water-filled that's purple. So the purple peanut one, I've used that with people that have had really severe injuries. Like one of my clients had a horse squisher, sat on her, broke her hip. And when she would get on the saddle, she just couldn't let her legs spread to sit down. So she would put that between her thigh and the saddle for like 5 minutes as she was just walking around. And then when she popped it out, she'd slide right into the saddle. So that really helped her in her recovery. And then the blue peanut, some people don't like dealing with two balls, so that's handy to just have the one.
That makes sense.
Interesting. I mean, it sounds like there's a lot going on here about teaching people correct pelvic tilt.
Yeah.
Would you say that that's true, and just how it relates to how you should sit and how, the neutral position of the pelvis and also like the driving position of the pelvis and the and the half halt and all how that all pieces can. I mean, you sort of began this discussion with that, but I just thought of returning to that a little bit, and one of the biggest things that you were saying about people that need to learn a little bit to slump in the saddle, and I wish that, I mean, it's tough because you have to sit tall, but not so tall that you're causing the incorrect or forward pelvic tilt. What do you think about that?
Oh, I totally agree. And this is where when you look at different body types, like if you tell a man to sit up, he's so much deeper typically from front to back that when he sits up, it doesn't really affect his back. But if you have a really lanky woman who's a little loose in her ligaments and you tell her to sit up, she like hinges and basically goes into extension, which is going to put the horse on the forehand, and then you get that forward tilt of the pelvis and your seat bones are pointing back.
I think that might be an anatomy problem, male versus female.
There's also
I'm going to tell you, Wendy, if I'm sitting with a forward pelvic tilt,
yeah, you're in trouble.
That's not comfy at all.
Yeah, not comfy.
No,
I'm not going to be doing that for very long.
Exactly. And we could get into a whole discussion about seat size appropriate to a person that has a lot to do with thigh length. But that's the other thing with the balls is they're going to lift you up a little bit. So if you're kind of wondering if you have the right size saddle and you sit on the Franklin balls, and yes, you find that neutral pelvis because that you've got to sit with your seat bones pointing straight down to be on the balls. If you go into a posterior tilt, and whether it's your seat bones are pointing forward, the balls are going to slip out from underneath you. And the same if you go into an anterior tilt. So they teach you really quite quickly to sit in the middle, but they also help if there's a bit of a saddle issue with it being a little bit too small, you can feel what it's like to have when you're lifted up, to have that hip open and that seat freer. And so sometimes when, like in Western saddles, I find the twist, it tends to be awfully broad for women. And so they have to go into a chair seat. And when I put the balls underneath their butt, it raises them up and it opens the hip and the leg drops into a beautiful position. So it can also be handy to kind of help, sort out some saddle problems. But you're right. We really are looking at feeling the correct alignment as opposed to trying to put ourselves in the correct alignment. And I think so often we try too hard and do too much. And so we create tension instead of good alignment.
Wow. That's so cool. I mean, there's just so much to this and that's what we really talked about was, you were just here for, my lesson and all my students were like, oh my gosh, really anybody can work on this, the biomechanics of your seat. And having you here now, I have a distinct feel of what it's supposed to feel like. And when I don't feel that, I'm like, oh, this is really bad. So I was like, I'm not sitting where Wendy told me to sit.
But the other thing we did, which was one of my favorite lessons, is we did the board under your foot. Do you remember that?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Board this was crazy. This was not. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a Feldenkrais. It's adapted it from a Feldenkrais lesson, Feldenkrais world. It's called the artificial floor. And typically a person would be laying on a Feldenkrais table when they do the board under the foot. But I love to do it with the rider in the saddle because you're weight bearing on your pelvis, on your seat bones. And so your leg is hanging. And again, riders try to put their leg in the right position, but create tension in the process. And so I have this little board. And when I get done, everybody always asks me, what's special about the board? And I tell them I go to Disney World because that's right there in Florida. And I have the fairies put fairy dust in it.
Magic
it's
dust.
Crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're not using a lot of pressure. I just meet the foot and then very slowly release. And our foot wants to meet the ground. So the leg starts to lengthen and the muscles decontract because the proprioception, the person's leg literally follows the board down. And when I put their foot back in the stirrup, they're like, their leg, it feels longer, it's more relaxed. One of the most common comments I get is, my leg is more stable, even though it feels softer, right? Yeah. And so that's the crazy thing is that, people go, wow, my leg is so solid. And they can't figure out how I've done it. But I've basically used their own brain. You know?
Yeah, it's really cool. I know. I said the same thing. It was awesome. So it was just, you can see we had a really good time when Wendy was down here hanging out with us. It was so great.
It was too short.
It was too short. So Wendy, can you tell everybody if they want to find more information about you and all your amazing products and methods, how can they find you online?
So I'm at murdochmethod.com, my website, and I have a shop there, and they can find the Franklin balls. I've got lots of articles there, and my books. I've written 3 books, and the artificial floor, sadly, is only in the jumping book. But most of the lessons in the jumping book apply to on the flat, because you've got to be in a good alignment for jumping, and then you just fold forward at the hips. So there's the board under the foot lesson is in the 40 jumping fixes. But like I said, there's lots of articles, and I have a Facebook page, Murdoch Method, and we post Murdoch Minutes on Mondays typically. And so there's lots of information. And my YouTube channel is also Murdoch Method. And I've got a video up there about the Franklin balls. Sure. And I think I have, I forget what I have up there because I keep adding content.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. Well, Wendy, thanks so much. And can't wait to have you on next month.
Yeah, it's great. I always enjoy being on your show. And I'm going to post that picture that we took down in Florida. I haven't posted it yet, so I'll put it up.
Absolutely. We'll make sure it gets on it as well on the show notes. Great. Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks. Take care.
Well, Phil, we pulled out. Justin was so awesome from Total Saddle Fit. As always, we really honestly love the products and use them. And I wanted to try the Slim Stability Stirrups. And I'm really excited. They came in and put them on the saddle today. And I also really like, they're a little bit different in the fitting than the original stability stirrup leathers, but they have the buckle on the bottom, and I'm very bad at describing things like that, but the buckle is on the bottom. So it's a little bit different feel than the original. I think it's a little bit preference on how you like to change your stirrups.
Yeah, I think those are harder to change, but if you don't really need to adjust your stirrups a whole lot, it's great because the buckle does not sit under your legs. So that's why these are called the slim version, because they're even flatter against the saddle. You have no buckle underneath your thigh, but like I said, you have to change the stirrup leather length in a little bit different way.
Right. Right, and you and I are.
If you don't mind that, it's easy to do as well. It's not like it's more, complicated, but just less than traditional, I think I would say. So
right, and you and I tend to be fairly traditional in our tack, so it is a little bit different. So it just really depends on which one you like. But as always, Justin's awesome, and I'm glad he was very, very great about having us try things. And so it look on the website, but these stirrups also, Karen rode in them today and she loved them. So we've been passing them around between the saddles just so people can feel the difference. And she was like, wow, these really do stabilize your leg. I was like, I know, actually. We really,
talk about
really
it every week. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we love it. So if you have any questions, check out totalsaddlefit.com. And they will answer any of your questions. And just the stirrup leathers are just one of their amazing products. So we hope you take a look at that.
This week's dressage training tip is brought to you by Total Saddle Fit, home of the shoulder relief girth at totalsaddlefit.com.
Phil, we're going to do the Total Saddle Fit tip of the week, aren't we? We haven't done one in a little while, and we like to get in there sometimes. But Phil, what's our Total Saddle Fit tip of the week from the Trainers Conference?
Well, I was just trying to pick kind of one thing that we can bring from the Trainers Conference. I mean, we got a whole bunch of tips. You wrote down so much during.
I have so much. I wrote. Phil, of course, didn't write it down.
What's Reese writing down now?
I wrote them in my journal.
Maybe you can pick one because you've got them all hopefully right in front of you.
Yes, I do. Well, so as always, we always talk about the riding journal, and we have the riding journal from Ruth Hogan-Poulsen that I have. It's literally on my kitchen counter. So when I come in, I will write down tips or things that we learned, and so I took it to the clinic. So I'm also really using these tools that we talked to you guys about. But one of the things that they talked about extensively, and Phil and I actually chatted with some friends about it too, is just warm up. Right. And how you warm up the horses and an effective warm up. And my kind of point with the whole warm up is I think it takes a while to find, especially if you have a tricky horse, to find the right way to warm that horse up in the right order of things. Wouldn't you say, Phil?
Yeah, and again, a lot of the coaches talk about, what's the ideal warm up, how to do the horse. But I mean, I think also what's the ideal appropriate warm up for a horse for his level, and just each horse has a little bit of an individual way of going, or the best way to prep them for the work that you want to do, and that can change from horse to horse, and that can change on the same horse depending on what level you're riding, and also sort of how warm or cold, how much energy your horse has for the day. So part of the discussion was evaluating the horse that you have on that day during your warm up. That can be difficult. That can take a whole discussion and lesson right there.
Right. I mean, I think we're constantly doing that. Especially with my own horse, my big horse, sometimes he's a little bit stiffer, sometimes he's a little bit looser. And to figure out the actual stages of warm up is really critical for that particular horse. Well, my other horse is not as complicated. The one I really have to, do I leg yield? That particular horse, he's not one that I can stretch right away, just doesn't work with him. Well, my other horse, he needs to stretch, and I can't really do anything until I can get him to stretch in the bridle. So I think it is a really individual task, and really, but at the end of the day, you're trying to get the horse in the right frame and mindset for whatever task you're going to do that day. So if you're going to ride a Prix St. George, how do you get that horse ready to ride a Prix St. George? So I thought that was quite interesting, and it really was. It was a theme, and they would talk about it pretty much on every horse, like which is the right warm up and what is not. I think the takeaway is every horse is different, and there's no real coined one. Wouldn't you say, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, but there are also some universal things that you should do. Like you should do straight lines and curved lines. Mm-hmm. You should do pretty much the exact same thing on the left as you do the right.
Yep.
That also can help your evaluation on the right side versus, of the left. And you should do full transitions and transitions within the gait. So, now some horses you can do the trot warm up first, or a lot of horses you want to do the canter warm up before doing a ton of trot. So that, different things to think about, but you can't evaluate the horse if you only do straight lines, because you don't know how they're bending on that day, and you can't evaluate how your balance is if you don't adjust the strides a little bit. So interesting discussions. I mean, if anybody has any questions they want to ask us about warm-ups, I think we had a lot of talk about it already, so we hope that maybe we can bring this to our listeners.
Yeah, we love it. And as always, you please feel free to always email or give us a Facebook shout out, and we always love it. So we hope that kind of gets your mind flowing with warm-ups for sure. Well, as always, the United States Dressage Federation is your connection to dressage education, competition, and achievement. Visit USDF.org for more information. That's www.usdf.org, the online destination for dressage. You can find our show notes and links to today's guests on our website, dressageradio.com. Like us on Facebook, just search Dressage Radio Show. Follow us on Twitter at Horse Radio. My website is maplecrestfarmky.com, and my email is reese@horseradionetwork.com.
I think the best way to find me is on Facebook, or my email is philip@horseradionetwork.com. I'd like to thank our sponsors for allowing us to put on a show, and don't forget to check out all the other shows on the Horse Radio Network at horseradionetwork.com.
Everybody, keep your heels down and your shoulders back, and we will talk to you next week.